Hello and welcome to this video. So now let's go ahead and let's continue building our lion or tiger game. So now it's time to specify the winner. It's time to identify whether someone has won the game or not. So we need to go inside the image view is tapped function, and here every time the image view is tapped, we want to check for the winner. So here before the ending curly brace of this method, let's go ahead and let's create a for loop because we want to iterate over our two-dimensional array here, winner rows and columns. We want to go inside this array and we want to iterate over the rows and columns. So here we have a specific type of for loop in order to do that. Let's say for, and then inside the parentheses first we need to specify the variable. So the variable that I'm going to specify here is going to be of type int array. So I'm going to type in here int, a pair of brackets. So the reason that I put int array here is that inside our two-dimensional array, you can see that we have the rows. So here, for example, this is the row, this is the first row, this is the second row, but inside each row we have these columns. And you can see that these columns are of type integer. So that's why we have an array of integer values. And then we need to specify the name. So here it should be winner columns. We want to get the winner columns from the, so just put a colon here and then refer to the winner rows and columns two-dimensional array. So we want to access only the columns of this winner rows and columns array. Let's create an if statement, and then inside the parentheses first we need to refer to player choices. This is an array that is going to contain the player choices inside our game, inside the grid layout, and then a pair of brackets. So next we need to pass the index to this array because we want to access the value that is related to that specific index that we passed to these brackets. So the index, we are going to get it from these winner columns of this integer array. So I'm going to refer to the winner columns, and then because again this is an array, we need to put a pair of brackets and we need to pass an index to it. So we want to get the index 0. So why did I pass the index 0? Because I am going to first check for the first condition of winning the game. The first condition is this one, the first row, the column 0, column number 1, and column number 2. If the user, for example, enters 3 choices here and we have the same animal in each of these columns, then we have a winning state, and this means that we can go ahead and declare the winner of the game. So let's go back to main activity. So that's why I passed the value 0 to the winner columns. So for example, let me give you an example. So for the first time that this for loop is going to be executed, it's gonna iterate over these winner rows columns two-dimensional array, and it's gonna go ahead and access the first row. So this is the first row of this array. And then when it accesses the first row, it's gonna actually assign that first row to this variable winner columns. So the first array, the first row is going to be assigned to this array here because it is actually of type array. And now by using this array, we can access its columns, its values. For example, number 1. So let me show you here. For example, we have number 0, number 1, and number 2. So now we can access these values here by just referring to this array, and then we need to pass the index. So in this way, we are accessing the first value of this array. And then we are passing that index to these array player choices. So if the index that we pass to this player choices array is 0, it's gonna go inside this player choices array, and it's gonna access the first value that is related to that index 0. Okay, so the first choice is related to the current player. Maybe the current player, it might be the first player or the second player. is chosen this column here or this column. Then in this way, we can access the value of the player choices, and then we can compare that value with other values in order to see that whether we have a winner or not. So if it sounds a little bit confusing, don't worry. Now I am going to just create a condition for you, and then you will completely understand what's going on here. So now we need to compare this value with another value. If the player choices winner columns index 0 is equal to player choices, and then we need to put a pair of brackets again, and then refer to this winner columns, and then a pair of brackets again. So now we need to pass the index number 1, right? The column number 1, or the tag number 1, this one. Then if these two values are equal to each other, then we can put an AND logical operator, and then we just need to put AND logical operator here, and then we need to put the second condition here. So now that we checked the column 0 is equal to column number 1, then let's check that the column number 1 is equal to column number 2. So let's say player choices, and then winner columns, and then the column number 1 is equal to player choices, winner columns, column number 2. So now this means that we have a winner. So let me create a new line so that we can see what's going on here. Okay, here we can create a toast message. We can say toast that make text, and then first we need to pass the context, and the text is going to be we have a winner, comma, and then the length is going to be short, or let's choose length long, and then let's call the show method on this toast object. So I ran the app here. So now let's go ahead and run our application. Now let's see what's going on here. Let's choose this first column. Oh, it says we have a winner. So there is a bug inside that application. So now let me tell you that this for loop here is going to iterate over each row that we have inside our winner rows columns array. So all of these rows will be iterated over. So this means that it's gonna check for all of these conditions, and when I select one of these columns, it says we have a winner. So this means that it is also checking for other conditions. You can see that, for example, this column or this one and this one, there is no value here, but there is a null value, and it is checking for that null value. And because this column and this column and this one has the null value, is gonna say we have a winner, but we have not. So this is a bug. This is your challenge to go ahead and solve this problem, and then continue watching this tutorial, and I'm gonna show you what is wrong here. So now I'm gonna show you the right way to debug your application. You don't have to, for example, think here that what is going on here. You don't have to memorize what has happened in the past that caused the bug. You just need to know the debugging process. How? By just creating a breakpoint. So we know that when I actually click on one of these image views, the message is we have a winner. So this means that the bug is inside, or maybe related to the image view is tapped function. So I'm gonna create a breakpoint here so that I can control the flow of the program and see what's going on here, because now I don't. So now let's go ahead and click on this debug app icon. So the shortcut in Windows is Shift plus F9. I'm gonna click on it, and I'm gonna show you what is happening here. So let's wait a little bit here so that the debugging process is going to start. So because we created a breakpoint in this line of code that is going to call the image view is tapped, we need to click on one of these image views so that this method is called, and then we can start debugging the application. So let's choose this first column. Now it's gonna start the debugging process. Now we can control the flow of the program. So now let's go ahead and let's see what is going on here. So first, it is going to execute this line of code. Here we don't have any problem. We are just getting the view as an image view. So I'm just gonna execute this line of code in its entirety by just clicking on this icon that says step over or F8. You can also use the shortcut here, F8. And then here it's gonna execute this line of code. So it is just related to the animation. We don't have any problem with the animation. So I'm just gonna execute this line of code. Next, we have the tag. So we can get the tag. There is nothing wrong with this line of code. Execute it. So here we have the player choices array, and then we are passing the tag of the column of the image view as an index to this array, and we are going to assign the current player value. So the current player value can either be player 1 or player 2. And we are going to pass or assign this value to the specific index of this array. So here you can see that there is a description here. It says that we have this array and the current value of the tag, the index, is 0 and the current player is 1. So it is going to assign the current player to the index 0 of the player choices array. So I'm just going to execute this line of code, and then it is going to check for this condition. So if the current player is player 1, then it's going to go ahead and specify the image, and also it is going to assign the player 2 as the current player. And then so because this condition was already true, then it is not going to execute this else if statement, and then it went ahead straight to this line of code in order to implement the animation. So we don't have any problem with the animation. Next, we have the toast message that is going to show the tag of the specific column. So I'm just going to click on step over. Now we have this for loop. So here where we can actually find the bug. So when I click on step over, let's see what happens. Now it's gonna go inside this for loop because we are going to iterate over all of the rows of this array, of this two-dimensional array. So let's see what is going on here. Let's take a look at this description. It says winner columns, this variable that we created here, now has this first row of this two-dimensional array. And this first row has these values 0, 1, and 2. So if you go ahead and take a look at the two-dimensional array that we created at the top, you can see that this first row has these values 0, 1, and 2. So now let's go ahead and let's see what's happening here. So it says that we have the winner columns array that contains these values 0, 1, 2, and we have the winner rows columns. So the size of this two-dimensional array is 8. So this means that we have an array that contains 8 other arrays. So we don't have any problem regarding the understanding of the two-dimensional arrays here. So now it's going to go ahead and execute this if statement. So let's execute this line of code. Now here you can see that it says that player choices winner columns 0, and it's going to take a look at this condition. So it went to this line of code and it is showing us this description. So again, we have an array that contains 8 other arrays, so we don't have any problem with that. And here inside this debugging area, you should see some other information. For example, we have the player choices, and then let's click on execute again. And here, it's gonna take a look at this condition. Now we have the second array, number 3, 4, and 5. So there is a problem here. It didn't completely execute this condition here. So if I click on execute again, now it went straight to this line of code. What's happening here? So, and now it's going to execute this. We have a winner toast message. It didn't completely check for other conditions. So now let's see what's happening here. If I execute this line of code, it's going to show this toast message, and then it went back to this for loop here, and now it's going to check for the other condition for the other row that we have here. So now it's going to check for this number 6, 7, and 8 of this array. And if I execute it again, now it's going to show us this toast message again. So there is a problem here. The compiler thinks, and it is right, it is thinking completely correct, that we have columns that their values are completely equal to each other. We have null values here, but that is not the condition that we are looking for. We want to see whether we have the player 1 or the player 2. So we can either accept the winner if it is the player 1, the lion, or if it is the player 2, the tiger. We don't have to specify the winner if it is a null value. That is wrong. That is the bug. How to solve this problem? If you go to the main activity class, let's stop the debugging process because now we know what is going on here. First, we need to go inside our enum player and we need to specify another value. Let's say no one, okay? Because we don't have, maybe we have the player 1 as the winner or the player 2, but there is another condition. When the player 2 and the player 1 are playing the game, we have no winners. So we are going to say no one. We can actually change it to no. And now let's go inside our onCreate method. So here you can see that this player choices array, we just specified the size. We haven't initialized it. So let's go and initially let's assign the value no to each of the indexes of this array, to each place. So the size of this array is 9, right? So I'm gonna refer to this player choices array, and inside the index 0, I'm gonna assign the value player.no. Player.no. Okay, semicolon. So now let's go ahead and assign this value player.no to each index of this array. Let me just copy and paste it multiple times. So we have index number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So we have the size is no, but because we start from number 0, the final index is number 8, and the value player.no is the value for all of these indexes, right? So now we can go ahead and we can go to our for loop. So here we have this for loop, and here it is our condition if statement. So let's add another condition to this if statement. Let's say that, and let's put the and logical operator and the player choices, and we just need to pass the index number 0. Let's say the winner columns index number 0 is not equal to, so bang, equal operator is not equal to, and then we just need to refer to the player dot no. If this condition is also true, then we can go ahead and specify the winner or declare the winner. If this condition is true, then we can go ahead and say that we have a winner. But if this condition that we have here is not true, so this means that, for example, we have a player choice here, and we have no one, no one, or no one. So if this condition here is showing us that we have no one as the winner, then we are not going to show the message we have a winner to the user. So that is what we are doing here exactly. We are saying that if one of the columns of the player choices is actually equal to no, then this condition evaluates to false, and then we're not gonna go ahead and execute this toast message. But if it is not equal to player.no, then we can go ahead and execute this line of code. So now let's go ahead and let's run our application and let's see what happens. So it seems that our application is crashed. So let's go to the logcat and let's see what is happening here. So here, instead of verbose, I'm gonna choose error, and I'm gonna search for the error here. So it says that there is something wrong in line number 27 inside the main activity class. So I'm gonna click on it here. So here it says that there is something wrong with this set content view. Okay, so let's see what is actually happening here. So here it says that the column indices start span must not exceed the column count. So my application is still crashed. So I'm gonna click on file and then click on invalid caches or restart. So let's see what happens. So when I restarted the Android Studio, it is showing me an empty area inside this design area. So I just need to go ahead and click on build rebuild project. So whenever that you see an error related to the onCreate method, so for example, the error is related to the set content view, this means that there is something wrong with your XML file. So you need to go ahead and somehow find the bug in your XML file, because that is the main reason that your application is crashing. Another way to debug your application is just to copy and paste the error in the Google. So here inside our XML file, we have this icon. If I hover over it, it says show warnings and errors. So this is a very good way to find the errors related to your XML file. So if I click on this one, and here you can see these messages. We have some warnings, so we don't have to worry about the warnings, because warnings cannot cause the application to crash. But we have this one. It says column indices must not exceed the column count. So this is the main reason that our application crashed. So if I go ahead and run the app, you will see that in the logcat, it is going to show us the same message. It is going to say that there is something wrong with the column indices that is exceeding the column count. So now we know the main reason that why the application is crashing, but we can go ahead and just copy this message. Just go ahead and copy it, and then go ahead and open your web browser, and I'm just gonna paste this error here. So this is a very good way to find the bug or find a solution to resolve the issues of your application. So here we can see lots of posts on Stack Overflow, and you can go ahead and take a look at all of these posts, and finally you will be able to find the answer of the problem, of the programming problem. But now let's go back to Android Studio, and here we know that there is something wrong with our XML code. So let's switch to the text tab. Now that we know that our XML code is the main cause of the crash of the application, we need to go ahead and somehow evaluate our codes. So here we have our grid layout. So there is nothing wrong with our grid layout. We have the ID, we have the margin, the column count is free, and the row count is free. Next, we have the first image view, the tag is 0, ID, and everything is looking fine. We have the second image view, the tag is number 1, and the ID is fine. The third one, we have this image view, so everything is looking fine. Now we have this image view. Let's take a look at this one. IMG number 5, and the width and the height, the margin, the alpha, the background, so everything is looking fine. The tag is number 4, but what is this one? We have the layout column 7, so we do not specify the layout column 7 here. That's wrong. Let's delete this attribute. And we have also this attribute. What is this one? Layout row. We do not specify this attribute for other image views, so let's also delete this attribute. We can see that only one attribute can cause a crash. Okay, so in order to self-close your image view, you just need to put slash and the greater than sign in order to self-close it. So now let's take a look at the other image views. Everything is looking fine. We don't have extra attributes or an attribute that may cause the problem. So now let's go and switch to the design tab, and here you can see that our layout is back. So now you should understand that only an extra attribute or maybe an attribute that is not necessary for a specific UI component, that specific value, that specific property can cause your application to crash. So here you should always check your XML codes if you are sure that there is something wrong with your layout. Now we can go ahead and run our application. So now let's go ahead and let's click on this first column. So here you can see that it is not showing us that we have a winner, because we don't. And let's choose this one. Let's choose this one. Okay, now let's choose this one. And now I'm gonna choose this column in order to have a winner. Now it is showing us this message: we have a winner. So the logic that we created inside our image view is tapped function, this for loop is now working fine. And in this way, we can successfully find the winner. And now let's go ahead and let's see who is actually the winner. We have player 1 or player 2. So before showing this message, let's go ahead and create an if statement. So if the current player that is going to play the game is equal to player 1, then this means that the player 2 is actually the winner of the game, because, for example, let me show you what is happening here. Let me show you the emulator. So for example, here we chose this column, so now the lion is the winner. But when we chose this column, we changed the value of the current player to player 2. Okay, so that's why I am checking for this condition. So let me show you again what is happening here. Let me run the app. So here we have this first column. I chose this one. When I chose this first column, now the current player is going to change to player 2, so that when I select another column, then we have the tiger image. Now that we have the tiger image, the current player is player 1. Okay, so now I'm gonna choose this column. Now the current player is player 2. I'm gonna choose this column. So now the current player is player 1. And if I choose this column here, okay, now the current player is player 2. So we have the winner, which is the player 1, but the current player is player 2. So here I am saying that if the current player is player 1, then the player 2 is the winner. So we can go ahead and create a toast message, and then we need to pass the context, and then here we just need to say player 2 is the winner. Okay, and then we need to just paste or write the length and then show. And also let's create an else if statement. So else if the current player is equal to player 2, then this means that the player 1 is the winner. So I'm just gonna copy and paste this toast message here, and then I'm gonna say that the player 1 is the winner. So now we can go ahead and delete this toast message. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's see that the logic that we put here, this if statement, is actually working fine, and then we can go ahead and refactor our code. Let's run the app. So let's choose this first column. Okay, this one. So now it says player 1 is the winner. So now let's go ahead and refactor our code. So instead of creating 2 toast messages here, I'm gonna just delete these toast messages, and I'm just gonna create a local variable inside this if statement. I'm gonna say that we have a variable of type string, and I'm gonna say that the name of the variable is winner of game. And I'm gonna assign an empty string value to this variable. Okay, so if the current player is player 1, we can go ahead and update the value of this winner of game variable and say that its value is player 2. And if the current player is player 2, then we can go ahead and update the value of this variable to be player 1. And then after this if statement, I'm just gonna create a toast message, only one toast message, toast.make text, the context. The message is going to be, for example, a winner of game. So I just need to refer to this variable. So winner of game, comma, and let's also concatenate this value with another value. So plus 2 quotes, player 2, or for example player 1 is the winner. And then we just need to specify the length. So length learn, and then let's go ahead and call the show method on this toast object. It's very important that you call the show method on this toast object, otherwise it won't be called and it won't show you the toast message. Now I forgot to put a semicolon at the end of my statements here, so we have no errors. Let's go ahead and run our app and let's see what happens. Now if I select this one, so we have this one, and now I'm gonna select this one. Player 1 is the winner. So it's working perfectly, but there is still a bug inside our application. So if I go ahead and select a column that is already chosen, then you can see that it's gonna change its image. So now in order to solve this problem, we need to go to this image view is tabbed function. And here, let's go ahead and let's cut this line of code and let's paste it here before calling this set translation X on this tabbed image view here. Because first we want to get the tag. So first of all, we are getting the tabbed image view and then we get the tag of the image view that is tabbed. Now that we have the tag, I'm gonna create an if statement here. So if player choices array, and then we need to pass the index. So the index is going to be the tag is equal to player.no. Then in that case, we can go ahead and allow the application to change the image of the image view or perform some animation. So let's open this curly brace and let's end it here after specifying the winner. So in order to see which curly brace is related to which block of code, you just need to click on the ending curly brace. So here we can see that this specific ending curly brace is related to this for loop. And if I select this one is related to the to our if statement that we created at the top, but there is a missing ending curly brace here. So I want this ending curly brace to be here after this for loop that is we created here in order to specify the winner. So let's put it here. And now the problem is solved. And if and only if the value of this player choices index tag is equal to the player no, then we can go ahead and allow the application to change the image of the column. But if it is not equal to no, then it might be current player, player 1, or maybe player 2. Then in that case, we can not allow that to happen. We cannot allow the image of the chosen image to change again. So let's go ahead and run our application and let's see what happens. Now let's select one of these columns. So I'm gonna select this column again. Here you can see that nothing happens. If I select this one, and if I click on it again, you can see that nothing happens. So everything is working fine. But there is another problem. Once we have a winner, we should not allow the game to continue. We should restart the game, or we should create a message, a dialogue, so that the user can restart the game. So let's go back to Android Studio. So now let's go ahead and create a variable inside our main activity class. And let's specify the data type to be Boolean. So let's first say that it is private Boolean, and let's name it as game over. And initially, let's assign the value false to this variable. And then when we have a winner, so let's go inside this image view is tabbed function, inside this for loop, inside this if statement here. When we have a winner, then we are going to set the value of the game over to true, semicolon. And then here, when we are checking for this condition that the player choice is not actually chosen, the column is not chosen, let's create another condition, the AND logical operator, and let's say that the value of the game over is actually false. If the value of the game over is false, so here I need to put another equal operator so that now this means equal. So if the value of the game over is false, then we can allow the user to continue playing with the game, to interact with our columns of the grid layout. Let's go ahead and run our application and let's see what happens. We could also create a dialog, and then we could show the user the reset option. So for example, here we have this one. Let's choose all of these options, and here so here we have a winner. The player one is the winner. So now I'm gonna continue playing with the game. So here you can see that nothing happens. So the game over functionality is also working perfectly without any problems. So now it's time to add the reset functionality to the game, because when the game is over and the user cannot interact with the game anymore, then we want to give the user an option so that the user can reset the game and play the game once again. So let's go back to our layout activity underline main.xml, and now let's drag a button to our layout. Let's drag it and let's put it here below this grid layout, and let's add the constraints to it. Let's give this an ID, so btn reset, and also let's change the text to reset the game. Okay, so now let's go and change the background color of this button. So I'm gonna choose a new color value, and let's change the text color to white. Hashtag FFF. So I think that's fine. Now let's go into our main activity class, and now we need to declare our button here. So let's create a private variable, and it is of type button. So its name is going to be btn reset. Next, we need to go inside the onCreate method and initialize our btn reset. Find UIID r.id.btn reset, semicolon. Now we need to go ahead, and here we need to create an onClick listener for our button, btn reset dot set onClick listener new view.onClick listener, and inside this onClick method we can put the reset game functionality. But for the reset game functionality, let's create a new method. Let's scroll down here, and before the ending curly brace of our main activity class, and let's create a comment, and let's say reset game function. And here let's say that our method is private and its return type is void. Its name is reset the game, upper of parentheses, and then open and close this method by using these curly braces. So first we need to know what we are going to do here. First of all, let's run the app and let's see what we have here on the layout. So when we run the game, here we can see that we have this button, reset the game. So I don't like to see this button when we are running the game or when the user can play the game and the game is not over. So in order to solve this problem, we can either go into the onCreate method and set the visibility of the button to gone, or we can go to the activity underline main.xml, select this button and search for visibility. And then here, click on this drop down. We have invisible, we have gone. The difference between invisible is that the button will be still there, but we will not be able to see it. It will be invisible. But the gone value is going to completely eliminate this button from its position. So let's choose gone. Okay. Here you can see that we have the constraint, but it is gone. And if I go ahead and choose invisible, then it's gonna bring back the button to its original position. So I'm gonna choose gone. And now if I go ahead and run the game, you will see that we don't have the button here. So let's go back to main activity. And when the game is over, I want to bring back the button to its position. How? We need to go into the image view is tabbed function. And here, when we have the winner, so inside this if statement, I'm gonna say btn reset dot set visibility, and I'm going to choose view with capital V dot visible. Okay, so this is the value that we are going to use. So when we have a winner, then we are going to set the visibility of the button to visible. So let's go ahead and test this feature, and let's see that everything is working fine. Now let's create a winner here. So now we have the button reset the game. Okay, now everything is working fine. Now that we have the visibility of the button to be visible when we have a winner, we can go into our function reset the game. So when this button is pressed, I want this function to execute. So let's go inside the onClick listener of this button inside the onCreate method, and let's call this method. Let's say reset. So the reason that I am calling a method inside the onClick method is that I don't want the onClick method to be crowded. Whenever there is something wrong with the reset functionality of this game, I just need to simply go into this method. So, and I just need to take a look at its implementation in order to find the bug, if there is actually. So first of all, when this button is pressed, I want to iterate over all of these image views that we have inside this grid layout or grid view, and I want to set the image of these image views to be null so that the user can start the game over. So first of all, let me tell you that a layout is just a view group. So we have a grid view here, right? This grid view is a view group that is going to contain children, and our images here are the children of our view group, which is currently the grid view. So this means that we can create a for loop, and we can create first a variable, and let's say it is index, and initially it is 0, semicolon, and then we want to continue executing this for loop until the value of this index is less than the number of children of the grid view. So I'm gonna refer to the grid view. So here you can see that I cannot refer to this grid view. Why? Because we need to declare it inside our main activity class. So switch to the activity underline method.xml, and inside this componentry section, select this grid layout, and here you can see that the ID is grid layout. If you don't have an ID for this grid layout, make sure to specify one here and switch to the main activity class. Let's scroll to the top and let's declare a variable, so private, and let's name it as, the data type is going to be grid layout, and its name is going to be grid view, okay, semicolon. Let's go inside this onCreate method and let's initialize this grid layout. So let's say grid view assignment operator, find view by ID, r.id dot grid layout, semicolon. Now that we have a reference to this grid layout, we can go inside our reset the game function, and here we say index is less than the grid view dot. So now we can have the number of children of this grid view. So here we can see that if I type in here get child count, so the get child count method is going to return the number of children or the number of views that we have inside this grid view. So here you can see that inside this grid view we have 9 image views. So this means that the number of children is going to be 9. So now that we have the count, let's put a semicolon. So after each execution of this for loop, we are going to add one value to the value of this index. So index plus plus. Let's go ahead and open and close this for loop by using these curly braces. Inside this for loop, we can go ahead and access our image views one by one. So first let's create a variable of type image view, and let's name it as image view. Assignment operator. And then here we just need to refer to our grid view and just call this method get child at. So this method get child at needs an index. So when you add an index or when you pass an index to this method, it is going to return the image view inside that index or the image view that is related to that index. So we already have the index here, so I'm going to pass the index and then semicolon. So here it is showing us an error, and here it says that the value that we are getting here is a view. The grid view is just going to return a view. But here we are 150% sure that we only have image views inside the grid view. So I'm going to put a pair of parentheses, and I'm going to use casting in order to let the compiler know that we know what we are doing here, and we know that we are going to get image views from this grid view. So now that we have this image view, we can go ahead and say image view dot set image drawable, and we just need to pass the value null so that there will be no images inside our image views. Okay, so this is the functionality that we are using in order to iterate over all of the children or the image views of our grid view, and then in this way we are accessing our views. So in this case, our image view inside our grid layout, and then we set the image drawable of that image view to be null. So this is one step. This is the first step to reset the game. After setting the images of our image views to be null, next we need to go ahead and bring the game to its original state. So when we start the game, we have some variables at the top. Here you can see, for example, the current player should be player 1. So I'm going to copy this line of code and paste it inside this method. So after the ending curly brace of this for loop, I'm going to paste this line of code. Or for example, let's scroll to the top. Next, we have the player choices. So this is our array. So inside this onCreate method, you can see that we are setting the values of all of these indexes of the player choices array to be player.no. So let's also copy all of these codes and let's paste them here inside the reset the game function after setting the current player to be player 1. Okay. Next, we need to also go ahead and we need to refer to our game over to be false. So let's go ahead and just type in here game over to be false, semicolon. But here there is a problem. Here you can see that I have copied and pasted the entire variable of the current player to be player 1. Here I told you that when you create a variable inside a class, this variable exists throughout the lifetime of the application, and we can access its value or we can change its value. But when you create a variable like this one, here we are creating a new variable inside a method, its lifetime is dependent to the life of the method, reset the game. And this variable will not exist outside of this reset the game function. So here we need to refer to the current player variable instead of creating a new variable. So I'm gonna delete this player data type. So now this current player is referring to the current player variable that we created here above inside the class, inside the main activity class. So hopefully that makes sense. So here it is, the logic to reset the game. First, we are iterating over the grid view in order to delete the images of our image views. Then we are setting the current player variable to be player 1. Then we are actually setting the player no to be the value of all the player choices. And then the game over is going to be false. So now we can go ahead and test this feature. Just click on play button. So here at the top, make sure that inside the game over button, inside the unclick listener of this game over button, that you are calling this reset the game function. So when I ran the game, the application is crashed. So we have another problem. So hopefully now you understand that programming and app development is actually about debugging 95% of the time. You can see that we are debugging and we are continuing adding functionalities to the application, and then another bug again occurs. Then we need to go ahead and debug. So this is how we create an application. Okay, so you don't have to worry about, for example, not having bugs, because trust me, you will have bugs inside your apps and you are going to be expected to debug your application. whether you are working on your own application or whether you are working in a company and you are working with a team, then debugging is an inevitable part of the process. So now we have a bug. So we just need to go into the logcat area and let's see what's going on here. So let me just scroll to the top. So here, let me take a look at these codes. So we should see something like, for example, fatal exception. So here it says that there is something wrong with line number 27. So let me go ahead and run the app and we can see that what is the error again. So here it says that there is something wrong with line number 48. So the error is related to this grid layout. So first, let me tell you that we have a grid layout and we have a grid view. There is a minor difference between these two views. So here, let's go inside our main activity class and let's declare our grid layout name to be grid layout instead of grid view. Let's change this name to grid layout. And also let's scroll down here inside our reset the game function, and instead of grid view, let's use grid layout and this one, grid layout. Okay, now let's go ahead and here, let me tell you that the grid layout that we are using here is not the proper grid layout. Here, take a look at this exception. It says we have a fatal exception. It says that this is called class cast exception. Android.support.v7.widget.gridLayout cannot be cast to Android.widget.gridLayout. So there is a problem here. If you go into this activity underline.xml file and switch to the text tab, you can see that we have Android.support.v7.widget.gridLayout. This is the grid layout that we are using. But inside the main activity class, we have imported this grid layout, Android.widget.gridLayout. So here, when we were creating this variable of type grid layout, we have chosen the wrong grid layout. So inside your class, if you want to create a variable in order to have a reference to a UI component, make sure that the class that you are importing to your file is actually relevant to the class or to the UI component that you have inside your XML file. So here we have v7 widget grid layout. So I'm going to delete this grid layout class name and I'm going to type in here again grid layout. So here you can see that we have two versions of this grid layout. The first one is android.widget. The second one is android.support.v7.widget. So this is the version that we need to use. So I'm going to choose this one. Okay, now let's go ahead and run our application. So here we have a compilation error. So if I click on this one, so here we are still referring to this grid view. I just need to change it to grid layout. Let's go ahead and run our app. So now let's play the game. And here, let's choose this one. So in order to win the game, I think this row would be perfect for the tiger. So I'm gonna choose this one and this one and this one. So now the player 2 is the winner. So if I click on reset the game, now we have some problems. You can see that the alpha value of these chosen image views is 1. So we should change it to 0.2 in code. So inside the reset the game function, inside this for loop, after setting the value null as the image of our image view, we can go ahead and say image view dot set alpha 0.2. So because this is a float value, we need to put the letter F here. Now let's go ahead and run our application. So now let's choose our images here. So here the player 1 is the winner. Let's click on reset the game. Now everything is perfect and the game is reset successfully without any errors. So we can go ahead and play the game again. Congratulations, you have built the lion or tiger game completely. And you can also make this game your own. You can add your own features to this game. For example, you can add a score or maybe other features. and you can go ahead and upload your game to the Google Play Store. And make sure that when you upload your game to the Google Play Store, make sure to share the link of your application with me. And this is a great opportunity for you to start coding your own dream app. So in the next video, we are going to learn how to integrate audio and video to our Android apps. So I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.